It's nice and
And
quiet in the block.
where do you live?
Yes, so I am north of Seattle.
You're north of Seattle. Oh,
Yeah,
it's
it's
oh
5:01 right
yeah.
now, and
Okay, okay,
pretty
shit.
early, and I'm surprised I'm this functional. What's up, everyone? Thomas here with For Real Movie News and Reviews, and I am currently on the line with Christian Tafdrup, co-writer and director of the new horror film Speak No Evil, making its world premiere on Friday, January 21st in the midnight category at Sundance. And I cannot wait until then because I can't wait to hear how everyone else responds to this film. But Christian, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about it.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Of course, I want to keep this conversation fairly spoiler free because there's a lot of twists and turns that happen in this film. So just that notice out to people who might be interested in seeing the film. But this is an interesting experience for me, Christian, because what I did was I triple featured your films. I watched Parents, A Horrible Woman, and then Speak No Evil, and it was so cool to like get a full sense of like your storytelling and your filmmaking style, which is one way in these films, and then you have this horror film here. So I want to talk more about that later on, but for those interested in Speak No Evil, give us a little synopsis. Just like, what is this movie about?
It was about a Danish family that go on a vacation in Italy, and here they meet a Dutch family. Both have kids, and they make like holiday friends. And the Danish family receive an invitation, like 3 or 4 months later, half a year later, and if they want to visit the Dutch couple in their private home, and they discuss it a little bit, and they decide to go. And then the story reveals on that, this weekend where there are guests at these people's house. And I can, not to spoil too much, I can say that the Dutch couple are not who they thought they were, and they are not as friendly and polite as they remembered them from the holiday. So I would say everything goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Horribly wrong, because and like I said, this movie takes so many twists and turns, and I think it makes for such an interesting horror experience. In fact, I think my husband, he after we finished watching it, he compared how he felt in this film to when we watched Ari Aster's Midsummer. Just that
Mhm,
level of discomfort in this new environment and like trying to
mhm.
figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that kind of what you were going for here? Do you really want to get audiences into that very uncomfortable experience?
Yeah, I maybe it's because I'm Scandinavian, but I when you deal with horror movies, as a horror movies in Scandinavia are not very popular, and in a way, I what I like most about horror movies is like the suspense, the tension, that there are something between the lines and you don't really know where it's going. That's all also why I always enjoyed like the first part of horror movies, and then the second part I think often becomes too silly and too much with spinning hits and a lot of blood and axes and goats. So we wanted to make a horror movie that was without supernatural things, and where you for a long time really don't know where it's going, but you can kind of guess that it's going somewhere bad, but you're not really sure. So creating that feeling of suspense and tension was the big thing about this film, and also the maybe the original take on a horror movie.
Hmm. You know what I found interesting? So, like I said, I did that triple feature and I watched all your films, and I remember watching Parents and A Horrible Woman, before seeing Speak No Evil, and in those experiences and in those stories, I get this like the sense that there's like some like psychological thriller that could have been a part of it. They're very much dramas and very
Mm,
interesting
mm,
dramas as well,
yeah.
but it's
Mm.
like psychological thriller is like in the background a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
so it makes me wonder, like, what's your relationship with horror films throughout your filmmaking career, and what made you just to decide to fully embrace horror here with Speak
Well,
No
it's
Evil?
it's fun you put it that way, because I when I look back at all my films, they're actually all horror films, but not like
Hmm.
a the true definition of horror or pure definition of horror. I mean, the Horrible Woman is definitely like a couples horror with this guy
Hmm.
and this horrible woman who does horrible things to him, and parents also have some, you know, supernatural magic realism elements. So I, without knowing it, I worked a lot with it. I think it's because when you work, I love to work with satire. I love to work with the absurdity of human beings and create situations that are awkward and not nice to stay in. I think it's a, you know, very artistic way to describe life. And then suddenly me and my brother with whom I write, we were having this idea for Speak No Evil. And when we start you know, fleshing it out, we thought this would actually work like a real horror film. And I must say, I'm not a big nerd horror fan. I really love horror films from the 70s, you know, like Rosemary's Baby and Don't Look Now and The Exorcist. And but I've not, you know, I didn't watch all these horror films from the 80s. It's not a big tradition in Europe, especially in Scandinavia. It's a little, you know, not a good thing to make horror films if you want to have something on the box office. It's very, very, you know, not something that people wants to see. But what I really, really enjoyed it with this was that you have to work with a genre that has so many conventions and so many rules, and you know, you have to build up to something that is going far out there and going too much over the top, but the craft is to build it up to that point. And the fun thing here was that we could use what we wanted to use. You could play with the rules, we could play a little bit against the rules, but when we were writing the script, we knew that we could work with something that was elevated, that was larger than life, but that we didn't have to work with the naturalism that much, and that gave us a lot of freedom. So for us, it was almost like a fable, or we also talked about it's like an opera. We were allowed, permitted to do things that I would never have done in a more naturalistic, dramatic setting.
Hmm. Yeah.
And sorry, as you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned like Ari Aster's film, and also you can also mention a film like Get Out. It's not like I'm
Hmm.
directly inspired by these movies, but what I really love about modern horror films is that you kind of mix different genres. You cannot
Hmm.
just make a you know, a splasher, or you know,
Hmm.
you can take satire. It can also be filled with humor. You can make statements on society, but still it can be thrilling, horrifying, exciting, all these things. And I think that's a very, very promising thing about modern horror films, that you can actually say something, you can make deep characters, you can make original stories, and it can still be scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I've realized about myself and my own interest in horror films is that I think in order for it to really hit with me, it does have to have that level of depth. The more in the psychological thriller or the thriller direction than the more traditional slasher, blood and guts horror kind of films. And you know, there's a place for all of that in cinema. I think audiences, at least here in America, I know here in America, audiences, we had our era of torture porn that people just you know could not stop, so you know, stop spending money on to go see in the theaters. It certainly wasn't my thing, but I do like when there's a little bit more thought into it, and when there's more character development in it, and there's twists and turns and things that I wasn't expecting. And it's so cool
Yeah,
because I saw so much of that in Speak No Evil, and
yeah.
I very much appreciated that.
Well, thank you. And for me, it was a thrill just to work with a more like American kind of popular genre, because in Denmark you're taught to make, there's a lot of what we call like kitchen sink realism, where the drama is actually a little bit small. Is about, you know, this couple, things are not going right, maybe one have an affair, but you know, they get each other in the end, and they also have a dog, and should they put down the dog or not? I mean, I think sometimes cinema is larger than that. And
Right.
so I was just inspired to put all what I've been taught about psychological characters and realism and combine it with, I think Americans is very good at, like thinking bigger, more conceptual, taking bigger risks, like making it more far out.
Mhm.
So it was trying to put some Nordic, some Scandinavian things into a genre in which I'm not very familiar with.
Mhm.
And then maybe something interesting can come out of that.
Yeah, and I think it did. I think there's a very
Yeah,
very interesting experience to be had here with Speak No Evil. Tell me more about writing with your brother, because you guys collaborated on writing A Horrible Woman.
Yeah.
And so you work together again on this one. What's that process like? How is it like working with family?
Well, it's good. I mean, I'm 7 years older than my brother, but it's a fun story because I'm originally an actor and I've always worked in both theater and films, and I wanted to be a director since I was 18, making my first shorts. If I've always wanted that, so I've been writing so many things, also films that are just on my desk and all that. And my brother, he's like didn't really know what he was doing, and he lived in Thailand. It was, teaching Thai. He speaks Thai and was trying to be a chef. And then I had an idea for A Horrible Woman, which is based on, my own horrible relationships in the past. And he thought that could be cool to write. And then he just discovered that he has had such a big talent for writing. He was working fast, he was excellent in dialogue, and we had so much fun together. So it could go horribly wrong, but I think what happens when we're together is that we know each other so well that we can put up every idea on the table. There is no, he can say, this is a bad idea, this is a good idea. We laugh a lot. And what we usually do is that we hang out, we talk about the film for a lot of time, maybe half a year, just to, unfold the idea. And then we work on a treatment for a couple of weeks. And then usually we write the first draft very fast, like in 5 days. And we sometimes I write the first half, he write the second. On Speak No Evil, we choose different scenes. And then we have a first draft in a week. And then we start working for a long time, and then we end up with the 12 or 13 draft, and we kind of have a shooting draft. But it's really, really nice to work with family so far. I mean, it can also go wrong at some point, but we know each other so well. We have the same kind of taste and humor. So I mean, I think we're dreaming of a little bit more of a breakthrough because we enjoyed the work so much. But so far it has been fun. And sometimes when you write alone, I think it can take it can double the time because you have no one to test your ideas. You go in one direction, then a month later you go on another direction. But when you write with someone you really trust, you can just put the ideas out there and he can tell me if it's good or not. So you can save a lot of time, I would say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's so cool that you guys have that that cooperation together, that you're able to work together and be very productive with that. So that's really awesome. I did notice that you didn't write a cameo for yourself in this one.
No, I was trying to actually.
I was waiting for it. Like I figured you could be like, I don't know, the Stan Lee of your films, and you just,
that was also the plan, but I think I couldn't. Should I be the guy playing piano at the school? There was a lot of, but in the end, this was a difficult film to make, also because of Corona. We were hit by it many times. We had the shootings took more than a year, and in the end, I also had to cut out scenes from the script. I actually had a little cameo as a butcher. There was a market scene where they sell a lot of meat, and I had to cut that scene out to save some time. Great. So next time maybe I'll have a cameo again.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You know what? Since you mentioned it, tell me more about, obviously COVID has had an impact all around the world on how we went about things and how we did things. Tell me more about how that impacted the development of this movie, the shooting, like what challenges came with dealing with COVID?
It's been a nightmare, to be honest. I mean, not shooting the film, but the circumstances has been extremely tough on us. I mean, we started in the end of February 2020 shooting this movie, and that's where COVID was, especially in Denmark. It was like where it all started up, and just 10 days later we were in the woods in Holland, in Netherlands, and we were told to stop and go home. And then I was sitting in a vacation house in Denmark for 4 months without knowing if we were gonna shoot again or not, because we were shooting the film in a house. This house had to be torn down. I had kids that were growing. I had actors that were afraid of joining because of COVID. And so I actually didn't know, and mentally it was so hard. And then we had in June, 4 months later, we had 2 weeks again, and then we had to wait a couple of months again. Then we went to Italy 10 days. Then we were shut down again. Then we did some second unit in December. And then the film was actually finished in March 2021. and it's just been finished ever since without premiering because of, you know, festivals, and we had to
Mhm.
postpone the premiere in Denmark. And so I would say the good thing is that I'm not alone. I you know, I read and I talked to a lot of artists and people, you know, doing all different things in the world that has been, you know, being under this horrible disease. But I try to tell myself that we did the film. I'm happy for the film. It's out there. I'm
Mhm.
very heartbroken that I can't go to Sundance because the physical event is canceled. But in a
Mhm.
way, it's been the path for this film all the way along. I just need to see this film in a live cinema with audience.
Yeah.
I haven't tried that except from one or two test screenings. So it's good that we're not a rock band, that we're not a theater
Right.
group, that we
Right.
actually have a film out there. But, you know, I dream of that day where the world is open again and where I can actually sit in some cinema in the world and see the people's reaction to it, because I think the film needs that.
Oh, absolutely. I remember like watching the movie. There's so many times where I'm thinking, because I was able to watch it at home, I'm able to react, you know, however I want. And I just wanted to have that experience with other people. Like, what would this film feel like in an audience and with a whole bunch of reactions and a lot of people gasping or saying no or like, come on.
Yeah,
Like, there's a lot of reactions that
yeah,
can be
yeah.
had here. So yeah, I am sad that it's not able to actually premiere in person, but like you said, there's a film, and it's going to get out there, and people are going to be able to have their at home experience with it, and it's still going to be quite the experience.
Oh, thank you. I cross my fingers.
Yeah, so getting back onto the story a little bit, the theme of the movie here is politeness, right?
Love it.
um and the trouble that being too polite can get people into, and particularly these characters. I and This movie takes that to an extreme, and it's so interesting because there's a line in the film early on when Bjorn and Luis get the invitation where someone says it would be impolite to decline.
Mm,
And it's so fascinating because that notion of saying no or
mm.
not setting boundaries permeates so many of the decisions that happen after that. It makes me wonder more about how this story was developed, and
Mm.
maybe was there like a situation that triggered this idea for you? Was there a time when you were too polite and that backfired on you somehow? Like, where did this story even come from?
Sure. Well, just to mention, I think I'm a very polite human being, and some of the troubles I had in life has been because I'm too nice, too polite. I think I learned by aging a little bit to be more tough. But you know, I've been in many situations. It can be work, relationship, and you name it, where I should have listened to my, you know, inner alarms instead of just, you know, trying to be nice to others. So I think
Mhm.
it's a very, very human, relatable theme. But the inspiration was actually one to one, because I've been on a holiday like this, like the characters in the film, and I was in Italy with my wife and our daughter when she was 3, and we met a Dutch couple, and his name was Patrick, and we were and we were sitting at a long table, and there is something about the Dutch and Danish that we have the same humor, and like they say in the film,
Mhm.
and they invited us to visit them in Rotterdam just, you know, 3 months after, and we said no. But then I thought, you know, imagine, in my imagination, just said, what if we have went with them because they were nice, but underneath
Mhm.
the surface they also seemed a little crazy. And my wife said, like, definitely no, we shall not go. And I was like, why not? They seem nice. And then I start, you know, coming up with situation if we were sitting in Rotterdam where I've never been in their house, and if this guy was as crazy as I thought, and then suddenly just the ideas came to me. So I think it was actually built up from an experience I had on holiday. And I was thinking back at my childhood. My parents also traveled a lot like this with us when me and my brother were younger, and we also visited people from Germany, Belgium, Holland, and spent, you know, a boring weekend in Nuremberg or Cologne or Berlin, just try to stand it out, and then we just tried to, you know, unfold the situation. And I was thinking of how many, you know, situations in life I accepted because I was dictated by social behavior of keeping up good appearance instead of, you know, trust who I am. And I think that was just such an interesting theme. And of course, in this film, which is a horror film, what will happen if you meet evilness? I mean, if
Mhm.
you're taught to be very civilized, you live in a part of the world where there are no really threat. Of course, we all experience threat, but you don't live with terror every day. You don't
Mhm.
live in Denmark with earthquakes or anything. I mean, you're sometimes the most trouble is you can get is like when you can't find your daughter at a playground or something.
Mhm.
So what will happen if someone really wanted to do bad things with me? And I don't know if I could fight against it. I would try to smile
Mhm.
at it. I will try to, be friends with it. I will try to turn it inside me and say, oh, I think it's a misunderstanding. I mean, he seems nice. And, we want to believe and trust in other people wanting us good things. So it actually, this idea is actually very personal. I didn't know
Mhm.
that the film was going to be about this theme in the beginning, but as we unfolded it, I could see this is actually something about life today, about how human beings can't really feel themselves anymore because they're too dictated of the idea of how they should be, instead of let go of ever dark feelings they might have. So it's also about political correctness. It's about wanted to behave and all that, which lead them to this horrible ending that I won't, of course, reveal. But yeah, so free imagination from real life experience, I would say.
I think a lot of my reactions to this movie came was incited by the decisions that they made, kind of what you're saying, where Bjorn and Luis are just kind of you know tending to the situation and like being polite and being friendly and like you're saying, giving a lot of benefit of the doubt. And my reactions to a lot of this is, why are you doing that? You should not
Yeah,
do that. This is obviously
no,
a better decision, right? But
yeah.
we can say that. I can say that from my couch, right? And so at watching a movie and kind of knowing that things are going to go poorly, I can holler all those things. But it's so interesting because once we get into social situations, that a lot of our conventional thinking changes, and maybe our behaviors change, just like being in the situation rather than just observing it. And so I think that that's something that I had to like remind myself by the end of the film, is like and maybe this is the case with a lot of horror films. There's a lot of horror movies where someone makes a not great decision, and you think, oh well, that's what triggered everything, all you had to do was not. But I think this movie really does do a good job of showing how easy it is to just try to follow those social norms and appease people regardless of how unusual the situation might be, right?
Yeah,
So I think that
I,
that
I
that yeah.
I'm happy you say so, because I mean, you can, when you do films, you have an opportunity to look at yourself from the outside, and it's
Mhm.
we have a lot of reaction like that. Why are they doing this? But what we do as human beings are not flattering all the time. It's not
Mhm.
like in American movies where you kind of do all the right things in the end, and
Right.
you will find secret powers in yourself, and you
Mhm.
suddenly you can fight and shoot with weapons. That would be like the typical hero in American thriller, but
Right.
here they just freeze in a way. And I think
Mhm.
that's very close to something we won't admit, that in reality these things are difficult. I mean, if we meet some stranger on the street that wants to beat the hell out of us,
Mhm.
some people are not just fighting back, even if you're, you have to protect your kids. So it,
Mhm.
it it can give an honest but not always a pleasant portrait to look at films. And there's something about horror films that I like, and that is that you are, as you say, protected because there is a screen, or you look at it at television. So you want to look at it because you are not
Mhm.
really there, but you recognize yourself, and you could be there if it goes
Mhm.
horribly wrong. So I think a film is an opportunity to take a step back and also look at how we behave sometimes, and that's not always so positive. But maybe we
Right.
can learn from it, as you say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so too. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from this film and like readjust, because there's boundaries, right? I mean, we live in a world with an online culture that has no politeness at all, right? So there's one extreme, but then there's also this other extreme of like meeting new people and wanting to set a good impression and then being too
Sure.
polite. So hopefully this movie can show people that there's a healthy balance.
I
there's a
hope so. But we were also talking about on a higher level that, we were, reading a lot about how Hitler came to power in the Second World War. I read a lot of stories about, how other politicians believed when he said that there shouldn't be no war, and they came home and said, oh, he's not lying, he signed the paper, and he was just fooling all of them. So I mean, it's also a way you allow dictatorship, it's a way you allow racism, it's a way you allowed a lot of things where you kind of maybe just trust authorities and not stand against it. And so I think you can relate to the film on a, of course, a human level, but also like on a higher level for what's going on in the world. I mean, the corona situation now in Denmark, in the beginning, you were just a little, oh, it's going to be fine, and no, it's not going to hit us, and we believe what the prime minister said, and totally was just totally cares. And I'm not saying there's a solution, but it's more like that you want to trust what other people tells you or how they act instead of listening to how you act. That can be extremely difficult. So yeah, I think you can relate to the premise on different levels. I hope so.
Yeah, and I can't wait for people to figure that out and what that means for themselves when it premieres.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
It might be a little early right now, but at least as far as like with this film reaching theaters, but will your next movie be a horror film? What are you thinking about that?
Well, as you said in the beginning, I think that the elements of horror are in all of my ideas, but I try to, I love every time I have to do something new to navigate in different waters, and I like to go places where I'm not feeling too comfortable. So just repeating myself here, it's not gonna happen, but I'll bet that there will be some, sinister atmosphere in it, and also some awkwardness and recognizability for people around the world. So, but right now, I just hope that I'll be able to make another film after the premiere of this one.
That's always the hope. That is always the hope.
Yeah.
Any last words or thoughts or anything for listeners or viewers about this film?
I mean, go for it. Don't be afraid. I think it's also a funny film that works on different levels. It's not like 100% gore horror films.
Right.
I think if you expect that, you will be disappointed. But it's about something and about humans and about society. And I think you should just sit back and enjoy it and don't look away.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it. This was a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for that.
I appreciate you reaching out. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. For those listening, as I mentioned, Speak No Evil will premiere at Sundance on January 21st in the midnight category. And you can check out the showtimes and screening windows on festival.sundance.org, and check ticket availability, of course. So watch it, experience it, and learn something from it. Right? Definitely, but enjoy the experience. There's if you like horror films and being tense and stuff, there's so much of that in this film. So thank you again, Christian, and to everyone out there. Until next time, keep it for real.